For more on this breaking inflation issue that's been with us for a while, we're joined by our good friend Nicholas Economides, professor of economics, NYU, over in New York. Good to see you, sir.
Very good seeing you. Thank you.
Up to half of all Americans are going to cut back on eating out, cut back on driving, cut back on going on vacations because of this wild ride we've been on inflation. Is the worst of it over?
I'm afraid that the worst of it we haven't seen yet. I expect inflation to last a couple of years at least. So what started as a demand push inflation, which started because of the trillions of dollars that President Biden distributed at the end of COVID, now has been changed into demand side that we had originally, plus supply side, because there are shortages because of the war and because of COVID to some extent in China. So we are in a very bad situation. At the same time, the Federal Reserve has increased interest rates and is promising to increase them dramatically. So the United States and the rest of the world face a real prospect that there is going to be a recession at the end of this year or in the beginning of next year.
Professor, I saw one statistic that up to 80% of Americans believe we are either in a recession or going into a recession. Does the Fed have to send the economy into a recession to essentially control inflation? Is there no other alternative?
Well, you know, there is an alternative. There is a way to do milder increases in interest rates, and that will not cause a recession. But the Fed is very worried that it might not curb inflation if it has milder interest rate increases. And the Fed has been wrong earlier when they thought that the inflation was just something temporary and it didn't need to do anything. So now they're a bit more careful and maybe a bit more draconian than they need to be, maybe a bit more extreme. But at the same time, keep in mind that this is an ongoing process. If recession really shows up, the Fed can completely stop the program of interest rate increases.
Right. So here's my problem that I have with all of this. Okay, we just saw a PPI out of China at 8%. That's not a good number. Okay, that means that from the factory it's more expensive. I know for a fact oil is up, which means shipping is going to be more expensive, which means not only does the stuff cost more coming from Asia, it's also more expensive to ship over here, which ultimately companies who sell the stuff here have to raise their prices, and it's this terrible, terrible cycle that's nearly impossible to break unless we just stop buying things altogether. How do we break this cycle?
Well, the cycle can be broken with a slowing down of the economy, but nobody really wants to slow down the economy. But unfortunately, given where we are, this is the only way out. And hopefully we can slow it down, but not as much as causing a recession. That's kind of a delicate problem, the so-called soft landing. Very hard to do and totally unclear if the Fed and the government can do it.
In the past, you remember the housing crisis very well, I am sure. In the past, when the Fed has raised rates and nominal rates have gone up, it has unfortunately impacted hard assets like real estate, right? People who have bought real estate, whether it's Airbnb or their own personal homes. Does the U.S. real estate market, or quite frankly, the global real estate market, have to pull back, or what some might say, even crash, for this to get resolved?
Well, I hope not, but we don't see such a pullback in the United States yet, despite the fact that mortgage rates have doubled. Nevertheless, we don't see a pullback, and that's because supply of housing is short. Supply of existing homes for sale is small, is reduced, and reduced because of the pandemic and other reasons. And because of that, and because the demand has stayed relatively high, partly also because of the subsidies that the Biden administration gave to everybody, we see a lot of demand, we see limited supply. So as far as housing is concerned, It might get reduced, but we don't see it at this point. At the same
Very quickly, Nicholas, I'm almost out of time, but I have a quick question I want to ask you about China.
Mhm.
They're obviously battling the COVID. If they can get some resolution or beat the COVID over there and get things open again, how much would that help on the inflation issue?
It would help tremendously. I think we have supply chain issues because a lot of things are produced in China and exported to the United States. If those issues get eliminated, it will create a flood of goods. It will be good for the economy, both of China and the United States. And I hope it does happen quickly.
All right, Nicholas, Professor Economides, thank you very much joining us from San Francisco, but he's a professor over at NYU in New
Thank
York.
you.